Okay, so I've got this 3D model of the space shuttle because I'm going to do a memorial based on the Columbia. And so if you are downloading a model that you want to use as a basis for your design, it's important that you get it to be the right size initially. And so anything that you open in 3ds Max, you can select, then right click and choose Object Properties from the quad menu, and then you will see the dimensions in millimeters. And so you can see there this is 37,365 millimeters by 14,000 by 23,000. And I know I've checked the measurements for the space shuttle and those measurements are correct. And so if they're not, if you need to change it, you'll need to scale using the scale tool up here to be the right size.
Do you think working with actual scale of the vehicles is
Essential. If you're not doing that, it's difficult to make any program like this work, whether it's Revit or a 3D program. In days gone by, people used to model in a pretty abstract way, just with generic units. But these days there are so many tools, especially lighting and materials, that are based around the real size, that you really want to get a good handle on the size. If it's a little bit off, it'll be okay, but if you're off by a factor of 10, it creates real problems. So 10, if it's 10 times too big or 10 times too small, it really makes things difficult. And so a good trick, if you don't have a model like this to base things on, just draw a box. And so you might know that it's roughly 20 meters by 30 meters. So I'm going to just draw this, roughly any size, and then over here in properties put those measurements in. So 20,000 by 30,000 by, say, 15,000 high. Okay, so that gives me an idea how big everything else in the scene might be. I might delete that before I go too far, but again, I've got a rough idea then how big everything else needs to be. Now, again, because I've got the space shuttle there, I'll use this just as a wall. So I might want that mounted up against the wall. And so remember, unlike Revit, 3ds Max doesn't know or care what you're making. So you don't need to tell it if you're making a wall, a door, or a window. You're just making geometry, just like AutoCAD. So I'm going to change the size of this, and that can represent a wall. So I've made the width there, or the length, in this case, 200 mil. And so I've switched from the Create panel to the Modify tab. And then you can see there, when you lose the properties in the Create panel, don't forget that you can always get them again in the Modify panel or the Modify tab. Length, width and height is all I have initially for a box. And I will just move this so that it's centered roughly. And so now I want to change that shape in a less uniform way. So I don't want to just change the length, width and height. I want to change the positions of some of these corner points. So again, hopefully you're getting used to this method. When you right click, convert to editable poly. Okay, so then again, hopefully getting used to these different sub-object modes: vertex, edge and polygon. So I'll choose vertex. I'm going to click a window to select around those points, and now click and drag with X and Z highlighted to move those up and to the right. So I make this time I'll make a window around the two vertices on the bottom. These I want to stay on the ground. So instead of highlighting X and Z, I'm just going to highlight X and drag that across. So the same at the back. Okay, so even if you don't add in any extra geometry, you can do a lot that, well, in Revit, if anyone's tried to do that with a wall or even an extrusion, you'd realise that it's not an option. So I'm going to turn that Vertex mode off. And now if I want to move both of these things, I can select with the window and still use that same gizmo to lift this up. So just clicking on Z, I can lift those off the ground. Oh, because I converted to an editable poly. So here you can see it's, when you right click, convert to editable poly, and then you get vertex, edge and polygon over here.
But you had the planes just in there as it's not an editable at all. It's just a plane.
No, that's fully editable, so that's another one. If I select it.
Highlight a square around
Oh,
the
yeah.
area, and but it would only select the point of the wall.
That's
the
right.
point of the
Yeah, so when you're in sub-object, so if you go to vertex, that's right, it's like sketch mode in Revit. Yeah. So there, yeah, so I've only got the two vertices, part of this initial box shape within that window there. So now I'll click on this button, hopefully again you're getting used to this in the bottom right corner, the minimise maximise toggle to bring in the other four viewports. So I might want to bring those points down back to the ground. So I've got a basic form there, but then remember you're making an interior space. So the thing I wanted to show you that isn't in those other videos is how to get some views and work focusing on your interior. So modelling inside the box, really. So we're going to use a box tool again and make a big box that goes all the way around this. So this might be my building. Bring that up. And then I've right-clicked in perspective viewport so that I can zoom out there and you can see it's covering everything I've done so far. But I want to see inside and see what happens as I change this. So there's a tool we haven't really looked at very much yet that you use to view things from anywhere, and you can probably guess what it is because you've got the same tool in Revit. You create cameras. So in the create panel you've got the camera icon there. Now cameras in 3ds Max I think are far superior to what you have in Revit because they work just like real world cameras. The cameras in Revit allow you to do things that really aren't possible with a real camera, and they're more of a graphical tool. They're good for some things, but again, if you've done any photography, you'd know that there are some problems with the way the camera tool is set up in Revit. When you click on the camera tool in 3ds Max, you'll see, well, firstly I'll just need to create it. So here you've got two options, target and free. And I'll start with target because that's the most like one you make in Revit. So camera first, then target. And now you can see that it gives you all sorts of options, which if you've done photography, you might already have come across. So have any of you worked with an automatic with a manual camera? An SLR? So, a long time ago? Yeah. It's a really good thing to practice if you want to work in design, any field of design really, but particularly interior design, architecture related disciplines, all make a lot of use of photography and photographic concepts. So I definitely have, I've got a couple of SLRs and I do same things with other tools as well. So it's a good thing to play with if you haven't already. And they're really cheap these days. I couldn't believe, if you like Nikons used to be super expensive, and I paid about $1,500 for one about a year and a half ago. That exact same camera, the same model and everything, is now about $350 to $400. New.
So
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
The new wave SLR coming out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this one is 24 megapixel, and I'll get the model for you. It's a great little camera. Well, it's not little; it's big, but I took it around the world, and it survived the whole trip, and took great photos. And it was never a top of the range camera, but it was a really good mid-range camera. And that's with a 35 to 80 mm lens, which is a good adjustable lens to have. And so it's 20 to 80. And so that's a good range. And for interiors, it's almost essential to have a small lens, like a 20 mm, because with a normal lens size, you won't get a wide enough view for most interior spaces.
So a small lens that gives you a wider.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. I know. Yeah, that's what it takes a while getting used to. But you can see when you change them. Yeah. And so if you've got a zoom camera, you'd know. Yeah. So that's what I'll do here. I've got the target camera, and notice the lens size it begins on is 43.456. Yeah. That's what it's actually not far off. You're right. Yeah. So it is pretty close to what automatic cameras use. It's actually a little bit smaller. So often people think automatic cameras are 35 mm. That's right, they are. They're 50 now. And it changed in about a long time ago, 50 years ago it changed. Used to be 35 mm though, and that's why 35 mm film is still standard.
Yeah.
But the lenses got bigger and they didn't change the film. Just one of those things. But 43.456, as far as I know, that's pretty close to the human eye. And that's why they use that in Max as your starting point.
Sorry, but what does that actually mean? What is that?
So it's the focal depth. It's a bit of a technical thing, but it's the depth of the lens from the aperture or something like that. Oh, you'll see when you change it, it's an obvious thing. It's really adjusting your field of view.
That's why a 20 mm, it looks like the depth is actually like that, so you can actually see that.
That's right, exactly. That's right, yeah. Yeah, and so when you see it, and when you're using the lenses, it's pretty intuitive because you'll see the view get wider.
Yeah.
And once we make it here, you'll see that as well. But it's good just to have a bit of a handle of those standard lens sizes that you have with cameras. And here, again, the stock lenses in 3ds Max. And your eyes, of course, see things in the same way. So if you create one, I'm just going to click and drag to create first the camera and then place the target on what I'll be looking at. And then you can see the field of view. So that width there is determined by this lens size. And if I change it, I'm going to go to 35, which is smaller, and notice that the field of view has become wider. If I go down to 28, wider again, 24, wider still. So the smaller the lens, the wider the view. If we go up to say 100 or over 100 mm lens, 135, that's really narrow. And that's how they get zoom effects. So when you see sporting photographs, especially where they're miles away from the action and taking it from the sideline, that's right, they can zoom right in. It narrows the field of view and flattens it. But they can, of course, see things more closely from further away. So, so once you understand that, that's the basis of perspective, and it's really the basis of drawn perspective as well. It's just that when you're drawing it, you can fudge things a little bit, and it's not like a camera, always. So it'll help, though, to understand the way you draw as well. So now I want to put this into the perspective viewport, and I'm going to right-click there, and then just with the shortcut C, set the camera view. So, yeah, C on the keyboard. You can also click here where it's got the label. So I'll undo, I'll just click here. So it said perspective before, now it says camera 1, but you can click there and I can go back to perspective, which lets me adjust it back to the way I had it. And so maybe I'll show you can put it into another viewport. If I right click and make this one yellow, again it says this time left is the view type or the view direction. If I click there, I can choose cameras, and camera 1 and C on the keyboard will do the same thing. This one's wireframe, but I can click there where it says wireframe and change that to any other graphics mode. So realistic or shaded is a good one. So that's with the camera at the ground level. So to bring that up, you can move the camera just like anything else. I'm going to right click to finish creating it, and then I can lift it up with the Z axis there to see from higher up. but I might want to move the target with that so that it continues looking horizontal or with a view plane parallel with the ground. So as well as moving cameras, you can also try using the view controls. And so if you're used to the way they look normally, notice how you have these buttons like zoom, pan, orbit down in the bottom right corner. If I go to a camera view, notice they change a little bit. So they're similar, but they just be aware that they will change a bit. And it's a good thing, because then you get standard camera controls that people who are photographers, but people who work with cinematography and cameramen generally will be familiar with all of these different controls. So in film, you'll hear people talking about trucking the camera, and that's an option you have here. So with truck, it's like pan. You can bring the camera up or down, and the target will go with it. So when you hear that term, when people are talking about film, that's what they mean. It's similar to panning, but panning is exactly, that's right. It is. It's moving just the camera. That's right. Exactly. Yep. Yep. So you've got the option to pan here, but notice it's in with orbit. And there we are. There's pan, which, like you said, just moves the camera. Also, it rotates the camera. That's what a pan is. So a pan technically is, a camera rotation, which at first looks a bit like a truck, but then you realise the camera's not moving, and it's just rotating it, or in other words, moving the target. So, so again, once you see those different icons, you can experiment with those, but truck is one of the more useful ones. And then on the Modify tab, I can still go and adjust the field of view. And so like I was saying, with interiors, you often need a wider field of view. When you see real estate photos of especially small units and things like that, I'm looking...
They're tiny. You go in there and they're tiny, and you look at the photos and they're huge.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so, any idea what lens size they use for those?
It must be a really tiny one.
It is, yeah. So generally bigger than 20 mil, but well, sometimes they go down to 20. So with 20, you can see how much bigger this looks. But usually it's about 24 that they use for those interiors.
Like for real estate?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like they always put on like the best photo.
Yeah.
And it's like,
And if they don't
it's
show
rough,
it.
like,
Yeah.
it's like backyard. And we always do both of them.
So, yeah, so just make sure you've got an idea about the camera tool, and then I'll just show you a few more things with modelling. So here, I've got my box that's the size of the building that I want to make, and now I want to make that into the form I want. And even though you're doing an interiors project, you want to have a rough idea of the outside form of the building. And so then I might have an idea that I want it to have so many segments that I can modify going one way, and maybe a couple going the other way. So I can start deforming this, and maybe just one or two this way. So it's good to think about the number of segments that you want as a starting point before you convert to an end to a poly. And so, actually I know with this one that I don't even need that many height segments. So you don't, more's not always better, you can always add more later on. And so again, if I right click there, convert to end to a poly, just like before. And so now I can, again, just go to Vertex, or Edge, or Polygon, being the three main options. And there, just like you've done in those tutorials, often a good idea, if you don't need them, to delete the faces on the bottom. So I'm just selecting by holding a control here, delete, and I've got an open shell. And then with Edge, I could select groups of edges. You can see there it's selecting like a crossing in AutoCAD or Revit, no matter which way I go. You've got the option on the main toolbar there to change it to a window if you just want the things inside the window. So it gives you the same options as Revit and AutoCAD, but it's not done with left to right or right to left. It's done by choosing that toggle. So I can bring this up, and maybe I'm going to bring this one up a bit as well. And then I want to bring all of that, and then have some of these touching the ground. Oops. So, exactly, yeah. That's right, exactly, yeah. And it's really becoming the dominant modelling program, even for people who use other programs like Maya and things like that for more advanced things. It's just got such a versatile tool set for modelling that yes, well, it's difficult to learn everything, but I still think that AutoCAD is another thing that people could be using. So that's as far as I want to go with that that basic form, and then maybe to show you how with a couple of modifiers that you've already used, I can make that into something more usable. So remember you used the taper modifier. So if I wanted to deform this further, I can still use modifiers on top of that, and so I can make it go in different directions. So I can curve it if I want that sort of form, or to maybe show you something extra. Remember, I've been using the sub-objects for the editable poly. The taper has a sub-object as well. So clicking on the plus there, you'll notice there's a gizmo. And that way, if you've been thinking, well, does the taper always need to come up from the ground? I'm going to change to rotate here and change that with the angle snap turned on as well. And I can change the direction of the taper. So it doesn't need to go up from the ground, it can go left to right. So then, again, can play with these values and get completely different forms. So the other modifiers, if you remember as well, shell was another one that you might remember from those tutorials. If you don't, make sure you finish them. So with shell, I can give that a thickness. So there it's set to 1 inch for the outer amount. I'm going to make that more like a wall thickness, so it's for 400. And so you can see then that this thin shell is now something with a thickness. Now notice it's not a very good colour, and at any time you can click on the colour swatch next to the name at the top here. You've got a little black and white usually button that you can change to any colour you like. And then just to show you maybe how to go back and keep working on this, I don't want to go too far with this, you've got then in the stack there the original editable poly, and so I can go back to that original form and keep modifying it further. So I might realise this needs to come down, or maybe I want to make it more deformed, so then I'll change to the view from the side. And I might want to make these slope more. And so that will all be transferred or translated with the modifiers that I've added after I make those changes. So if I realise that parts of it need to be removed, that's not a problem either. But maybe I'll just leave that one like that for now, and I'll do another video later to show you booleans again, So just make sure you have done those exercises. If you haven't, then you've got some extra time to do them today. In this one, 3D Specs Intro 3. So remember, the first building will show you all of those techniques that I've just demonstrated. The second building shows you Booleans, so subtracting and using union and tools like that. So I'll give you some time to try those things, but you need to make sure you keep practicing with the program.